Hello and welcome to the Park Bench. I'm your host, David Hawksworth, and we're here with Brett Lamer, who is Park Operations Manager and the City Forester.
Yes.
I bet you a lot of people didn't know we have a City Forester.
Yeah, possibly.
So, well, as we're taping this, it's a beautiful, warm, spring-like day.
Yeah, it's hot.
That means things will be in bloom soon, trees will be leafing out, and that's what we really want to talk about today is trees, and what's called the urban forest. I've never heard that term before, so what is the urban forest?
Well, a lot of people haven't heard that. Basically, what we refer to when we're talking about the urban forest is all of the trees that make up our city, that whether it be private trees, trees in your yard, in your front yard, in your backyard, the parks trees, trees on green spaces such as islands and medians, and also right-of-way trees. All of those make up what we refer to as the urban forest.
Okay, so it's not just trees in the parks.
Nope.
It's trees all over the place.
Every tree in Salina is considered part of the urban forest. And I only have a responsibility over some of those trees, like parks trees, islands trees, and then I have some say over right-of-way trees. But you, as a citizen, have a say over some of those trees as well. Anybody that plants a tree in their yard, you've contributed to the urban forest. And so it's something that everybody can kind of see as a whole, as the whole, instead of just an individual tree. You're actually contributing to a forest, if you look at it that way. They changed it to urban forest just to get people to understand that these trees serve the same purpose that those in a forest setting do as well.
Okay.
So that's why they like that name, that title.
All right. So you mentioned trees in the right-of-way. Maybe we can just define, first of all, what is the right-of-way?
So right-of-way is basically the area, most people have, if you have a sidewalk in your yard, that area from that sidewalk to the curb of the road. If you don't have a sidewalk, typically you have an area designed as right-of-way, even if you don't know it. And that typically can be up to 8 feet wide or even up to 15 feet wide, depending on how large your yard is and how the determined right-of-way is for that area. And so any tree that we talk about it, when we say right-of-way tree, that's what we're referring to. They used to be a lot of times referred to as city trees, and that's a little unfair. That's kind of a misnomer a little bit. They're right-of-way trees, and that's what when we say right-of-way trees, that's what we're referring to.
Okay. So are trees in the right-of-way the city's responsibility, or is it the homeowner's responsibility?
Excellent. There's a little bit of tandem responsibility there. So basically, the tree, we refer to it as the property owner's tree. And how we do that, or how we define where we step in, is we have curb-to-curb responsibility, and I can define that in a second for you. So we have curb-to-curb responsibility for those trees. But if you want to do something to that tree, you're more than welcome to do that, and depending on needing permission or whatnot, and I can get into that further in a second. So curb-to-curb responsibility, where the city will step in, is if there's a tree in the right-of-way and we say curb-to-curb, that means if you go to the curb at your house and you go to the curb, you can look across the street and there's a curb over there, we will take care of the tree inside that area up to about 15 feet. We'll deal with low hanging branches. We don't want to damage any vehicles or damage any UPS trucks and that sort. We also will do dead limbs that are above the street. We don't want those falling on anybody. So if there's a dead limb or the tree is dying, we'll step in there. We'll also step in if there's a hanger. What a hanger is defined as is you have a big windstorm and the branch breaks, but it doesn't quite fall out of the tree. We'll step in and we'll get those as long as they're over that right-of-way, or the curb-to-curb, over the street. Where we also will step in, and I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but where we also step in is if that tree is dead, we will step in and contract remove that tree. That's something that we provide. We're trying to protect the road and people that are using that road as a whole. We really want to protect that, so we will step in there. So we will step in if there's a dead tree as well.
So if I wanted to plant a tree in the right-of-way, do I have to get permission from the city?
Yes, that is something that we offer. It's usually verbal. I usually will just come out, inspect the area, and give you a yes or no. What we typically are looking for is a couple things. One thing is something that may be unforeseen to a lot of people. They might not realize that if they plant a large oak tree and they've got power lines running through their right-of-way, eventually we're gonna have to remove that tree because it's gonna grow into those power lines. So we're trying to protect the citizen there. The other part is that if there's underground utilities that we know about that may, you got water meters and stuff like that. We want to protect that, the citizen from buying a tree, putting it in there, and then having to remove it shortly after. The other thing we look at is what we call sightline issues. And sightline issues are if you're on a street corner and you pull up to a stop sign and you look down the road to see if oncoming traffic and you can't because there's a tree in the way, we refer to that as a sightline issue, and those have to be removed right away. So we don't want you to waste your money buying a tree and putting it in there and then having to remove it right away. The other thing that we look for, and the reason we want people to get permission or at least a yes or no, is depending on the size of your right-of-way, the distance between the edge of the sidewalk and the curb, you may put a large tree in there, and then in a couple years the sidewalk's going to be buckling and the curb's going to be busted up. And we want people to understand that not every tree is perfect for every situation. So if they call and they say, hey, I'd like to put this massive oak tree in this 5-foot right-of-way, that's not going to work. We want at least a 12-foot area for those trees, or 10 at minimum and more. And so we might step in and go, look, it's okay to plant there. It's not a sight line. You're not under power lines. But how about one of these smaller trees so that way you don't have to deal with a broken sidewalk or a broken curb later.
Right.
So,
and that would be the homeowner's responsibility to repair that.
Yes,
it
would. That's exactly right. And we're trying to look out for them as well in that case.
Right. So if you do have to remove a tree, do you leave a stump?
Yes. In fact, so I'll get back to one other thing when you reminded me is, so if you would like to remove a tree, there's already a tree in your right-of-way and you'd like to remove that tree, you can do that. We used to have a policy that said you could not without the city forest permission. The reason we had that in place was because we had some historical trees along 9th Street and some other areas. They've since been basically removed, and so there's really not a lot we'd protect. It would be nice to know that when trees are removed, just for sake of, we take inventory of them every 5 years. So for that aspect, but we'll find out when we go by there. So you do have the right to remove them on your own if you would like. If it's not dead and you just don't like it, you can, as a civilian or a citizen, you can remove that tree on your own dime, no questions asked. You can just do it. When it comes into the stump though, if we remove the tree is dead or is dying and we remove it, then we will come back and remove that stump. If you remove the tree, then you would be responsible for that stump, and we want to make sure that you're aware of that. So we always try to remove any stump that we produce, but if you remove the tree, then you would be responsible for removing that stump.
Okay. So. Something that I don't know, so I'm just going to ask the question. A few years ago, there was a major project on 9th Street where you removed a lot of trees from the...
removed a lot of them.
Are there any other projects in the works for that same kind of thing to happen?
Nothing that I know of. If you're not familiar with that project also, one of the things that we did, and this has been a new thing, I'm really excited to see it from other departments, is when they have a project like that, what they've been doing is they get me involved right away, especially if they're going to be removing trees. So if any of you, if you're familiar with Billbrook Park, they went and did a drainage project, and they called me ahead of time saying, hey, we're going to be removing some trees here. What would you like us to do? Or is this tree just, do we have to keep this tree? And I tried to work with them and try to get the better the trees kept and the worse ones not. In a project like 9th Street, what we did is they stepped in and they had me come through, and they were like, there's no choice, we have to remove this tree. And I tried to talk them out of it. There were some really nice trees that we had to remove in that project. But what we did do is we went back to the property owner and we offered them a tree if they would like to be planted. They get 1 for 1. If they lost 1 tree, they'd get 1. If they had lost 2, we'd get 2. And that's something that we're trying to do, because we don't like removing trees without replacing those trees. And so any property owner that declined to take one of those trees, what we ended up doing is planting them in our parks. So we didn't lose the trees, but yeah, it made 9th Street look a little odd, but we didn't lose those trees. As far as like future ones, there's nothing that I know of, but like I said, one of those great things that we've been doing here recently is other departments, when they come up with one of those projects, they get a hold of me, but none of those that I know of right now are in the works. So hopefully we're good for right now, but eventually there will be a case of that, and I hope we continue working together and planting those trees, whether it be on site or at least somewhere in our urban forest, as we were discussing.
Okay, well, cool. like I mentioned before, there's probably not a lot of people that know that we have a city forester. Besides the right-of-way issues that we talked about, what else does a city forester do?
So I basically manage all of the urban forest. So if you have a question on a tree that's in your backyard and you're like, something's wrong with this, I'm more than happy for free, no charge. You just call us up and I'll come out and look at it. And if I don't know, I'll try to find out, because there are some things that I still don't know, obviously.
So if a tree is diseased or something like that?
I had a common one, especially here when we get in the wet season, is cedar apple rust. You know, you'll have a cedar tree and you'll get these orange, gooey looking growths on there, and I get called every year for it. Somebody goes, something's wrong with my cedar. I come out there and I look and I go, okay, it's cedar apple rust. Don't worry, when it dries out, it'll go away and there's no harm to your tree. So if you have issues, if you have spots, if you have dead limbs that weren't there before, or there's a lot of times where people want to keep this tree and it's not looking good, is there anything they can do? And I can help assist with a fertilizing plan, or at least knowledge of, okay, here, you know, even though they're big and you don't think they need a lot of water, maybe it needs water or something like that. So I can tutor people, I can help them. I've walked around a tree and explained exactly what limbs I would trim on that tree, and then they took notes, and then later they would do the trimming themselves. But I'm more than happy to do that stuff as well. So I'm here as a resource for citizens to come and ask any questions they might need.
That's great. What a great service to the city of Salina.
Fun.
And that's all free of charge.
Yes. Yeah. I'm here for people. I'm just a free resource that they can ask.
Okay. So if I wanted to get a hold of you, how do I do that?
You can call our office, 785-826-7275. Ask for the city forester. They'll know exactly who to get to, and that's how you do it. And then leave messages. If you have, the other one is, if you go back to like the low limbs and all that, if you know that there's low limbs, a lot of times we have a plan, but sometimes things get missed or other things. So if you see a low limb, if you just call us, call that same number, and then just leave the address. All you have to say, you can just say, hey, there's some low limbs at 755 Sunrise, or whatever the address may be. I'll go investigate. We'll see if it's a legit thing, and then we'll go take care of it after that. But we need addresses, so just give us some addresses, and then we'll go from there. So that's another thing that they can do as well.
Okay, great. Well, I've learned a lot today, just in the last 5 or 10 minutes of us talking. I didn't know some of the services that were available, so I'm glad we had this conversation. So, so that's our show for this month. Thanks for watching the Park Bench, and we'll see you soon.